Let me see if the recording started. Awesome. I love this program. Well worth the money. All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everybody. Jazakallah khair for joining us. First, I wanted to start with a quick preview and some housekeeping things. I'm a little sick today. My throat is a little bit off. My nose is a little closed. And so if you hear me, I'm not unable to enunciate my N's and my M's. It's because my nose is a little bit closed. I don't typically sound like this. And because my throat is a little bit off, you might hear some me clearing the throats. So my apologies for that. Number two, on to today's topic. Last week when we talked about thankfulness, and basically we wanted to remain topical, and we talked about Thanksgiving and giving thanks, etc. If you want, there's a YouTube channel, you can watch last week's video as well. But today we are going to talk about a topic that was suggested last week. And the topic that we're going to talk about today is the topic of modesty or haya. So let's get started on that today. As a preface, whoops, I think I jumped ahead. As a preface, one thing I realized when I was preparing this topic was that I was unable to do justice to the topic. Basically, in order to do complete justice to the topic, I had to, number one, look up some of the rulings, look up the evidence of the rulings, what is the definition of haya, etc. It just became overwhelming. So what I did was, as part of this, I took some salient major points and I decided to discuss those. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. For anything that I present here today, I owe you evidence if you ask for it. Meaning, you don't have to take my word for it. If I assert something, for example, if I assert that children's bed should be separated at 7 years old, you are well within your right to ask me for the evidence. If you say that, what's your evidence, then I am personally required to present you my evidence, that I will be required to provide it, because if I assert something, then I should back it up with my evidence. But as part of this presentation, the reason I had to do major points and not go into those details was because if I got into the evidence and the validity of the evidence, the talk was going to become too long. I'm going to try to keep it with less than an hour, and perhaps even shorter, because I know people's attention spans go before that. So I owe you evidence if you ask for it. And the very last topic that we're going to discuss today, which is going to be some of the problems, some of the difficulties, some of the difficult conversations that you will likely have to have with your children regarding modesty, especially living in the West, especially living among people who have lost this sense of modesty a long time ago, not just among women, but among men as well. And how what was considered immodest yesterday is today modest. And basically this value proposition continues to change day after day, year after year. More and more immodesty becomes more and more normal. And so if I don't discuss these somewhat provocative topics, if I don't discuss them, then I felt like I was going to be shortchanging my audience. I felt like I was going to be shortchanging the young people who are going to be listening. So I am not doing it to shock you. I'm not doing it to shock your children. But it needs to happen. That conversation has to happen. So please accept my apologies, but that conversation has to happen. So that's our preface for today. What is the agenda? Today we're going to talk about what is the definition of hayat. That's the Arabic word for it, or modesty. That is the English translation. And then we're going to talk about the necessity of modesty, why it's needed, and its benefits. Then we're going to talk about some of the limits of modesty. And yes, there are limits of modesty, meaning there is good modesty and there is bad modesty. There is modesty that should occur and there is modesty that should not occur. Yes, you heard that right. There is some modesty that is not good. And we will talk about that kind of modesty that is not good. What do we mean by that? What is the limits of modesty? What are some of the rulings related to modesty? Now, when we spoke last week, I think most of my audience were thinking, I'm going to go into a lot of rulings on modesty, meaning how much women should cover, how much men should cover, just related to dress and things like that, or even, personal conduct, etc. The rulings on modesty, how you should enter a house, how you should ask permission before entering someone's room, how you should dress, how you should talk. The rulings were just too numerous. So I decided I'm going to cherry pick some basic rulings, and I'm going to discuss those. The reason I couldn't go into all the details was because it was just going to be hours and hours of talks, and we don't have that time. I'm then going to talk about how to develop some techniques to develop modesty in yourself and in your kids as well. And sprinkled throughout this talk, there's going to be a couple of things. I'm going to be presenting some Quranic verses, some hadith of some sayings of our Prophet and some doings of our Prophet as related to modesty. And also sprinkled throughout this talk are going to be some challenges you and your children are likely to face when it comes to this modesty, including the final topic, which is going to be some rather difficult conversations that you are likely going to have with your children. This is not a luxury anymore. They go to public schools, and in public schools, these topics are being discussed. And I can guarantee you, they know a lot more about these conversations, these topics, than you think they do. They are Western kids growing up among Western friends, going to Western schools. They know these topics, trying to sweep them under the rug and thinking that, hey, you know what? My kid isn't like that. This doesn't happen to my kid, is just naive. And we are going to talk about what those difficult conversations are and how to have them with your children as well. Excuse me. Okay, on to today's talk. So what is modesty? Or the Arabic term is Haya. I didn't get a chance to initialize my Arabic keyboard. That's why I had to write it in Roman English. But the word Haya, roughly translated, is modesty or shyness in English, has the same root as the word hayat, which means life. Essentially, it has multiple meanings in the sense that, our sense of modesty must permeate our lives. This is something that should be a part of our daily lives. It should be ingrained in our daily lives. It should not be an afterthought. This is who we are. This is how we live. And also, Haya provides life. It is a means for you to live a good life. It provides you life. It provides people around you life. It provides people around you and yourself vigor and energy to live life. So the literal root word from which Haya, the word Haya comes, means life. But the meaning of the word Haya, the dictionary meaning, not the root meaning, is it is a sense of shyness or a feeling that prevents one from falling into sin because of fear of being exposed or shamed in front of others, especially in front of Allah, specifically in front of other people. And also a fear of loss of one's honor, one's dignity, one's respect. If somebody is a dignified person, somebody who has self-respect, they would rather die than be dishonored, than be undignified, than be disrespected, than lose their dignity, than be humiliated. That's what we mean by shyness or haya. This fear of loss of sense of a dignity, honor, and respect is the meaning. A sense of shyness also is the meaning of the word haya. So what is modesty? When we refer to modesty, what is modesty? We're going to continue this in multiple slides. It is a state of the heart first and foremost. Meaning that if the heart is modest, it will show on the body, and you will not need to force it upon anyone. I'm sure you have gone to higher education. I'm sure many of people listening have gone to Islamic school. You have seen this, that there are people who are forced to cover their bodies, who are forced to be modest in their bodies But as soon as that impetus, that person who is forcing them gets removed, off comes the hijab, off they run to the movies, off they run to do this and to do that. Why? Because even though their body is being forced to be modest, because they're being forced to wear hijab, they're being forced to go to Islamic school, they're being forced to do this or that by their parents. Because the parents have not cultivated, and even in themselves, the parents have not cultivated a sense of modesty in their hearts, as soon as that force is removed, that modesty gets removed as well. They leave the house, they go to college, no more modesty. They start getting a sense of independence, they get their jobs, they start doing their things, no more modesty. So remember, modesty first and foremost is a state of the heart. And if the heart is modest, it will show on the body. But if the heart is immodest, vice versa is also true. It will not show on the body. If you force it upon someone, it may show temporarily, but it will not stick. And basically, this modesty will prevent, and is what prevents someone from committing shameful and indecent acts. And you can think of it as also as a distinguishing feature that differentiates human beings from animals. Now, if you notice, I don't know if and most of you have animals, but if you have a pet, somebody just joined. Okay, let me close this out. If you have a pet, if you have a cat, or if you have a dog, or if you have any of these animals, you will notice that they have no sense of modesty. They will urinate, defecate, procreate, and any other act in front of you, and they will not care. They'll lick themselves, they will clean themselves in plain, clear sight. Why? Because they have no sense of modesty. Not because, they are immodest, but because it's not part of their nature. It is perfectly natural for a cat to urinate in the open. Why? Because that's its nature. But human nature is different. In the sense that this sense of modesty, that we cover ourselves when we are relieving ourselves. We hide ourselves when we're relieving ourselves. We hide our bodies. We hide our bad deeds from other people so that people don't find out if we're doing some sin. This sense of modesty is something that is natural to humans. And it is not natural, and you don't find it among animals, which is why it is a distinguishing feature between humans and animals. And the converse is also true. The closer you are to animals, the more immodest you're going to be. And the more immodest you are, the closer you are to being an animal. These people, you will see them around, their dresses go shorter and shorter and shorter. They expose their shame more and more. And it at times starts becoming difficult to distinguish between their behavior and animal behavior. So what are some of these signs of this lack of modesty among people? One of the signs is not hiding one's shame, not hiding one's body, not hiding one's private parts. Specifically, when it comes to the rulings within the religion, not covering your aura, what the religion has mandated, the parts of the body that women should cover and the parts of the body that men should cover. If you're not hiding those parts of your body, you have no physical modesty. That's a sign of lack of modesty. Another sign of lack of modesty is that you don't hide your good deeds or bad deeds in front of people. You are not ashamed of other people finding out what you're doing wrong. You don't care other people know that you gamble or drink or fornicate or do this or that. Or if you do a good deed, for example, if you give charity, you like to show off. You like to tell people about it. Look what I did. Look how fly I am. Or to show off your accomplishments, achievements, and abilities. Being boastful about what one has done. Oh, I just purchased a house. Oh, going on Facebook and telling him, hey, you know what? I just sold my $500,000 house. I just moved into a $2 million mansion. Look at these pictures. Look how fly I am. Blah, blah, blah. This is also a sense of boastfulness and a sense of that lack of or loss of modesty. You are not hiding that which Allah has asked you to hide, and you are boasting about or announcing to the world what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked you to hide, or you're hiding that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked you to announce. And we will go into detail about this dichotomy. You will see this dichotomy throughout the rest of this talk. This duality that there is a sense of modesty. There are things that you should hide, and there are things you should display, and they are within modesty. And there are things that you shouldn't hide, and there are things that you shouldn't display, and that's from a sense of modesty as well. And we will go into details of what that means in a few seconds. Now, as I promised, I was going to discuss some ayat and hadith on the topic of modesty. So this typically is the ayat or the verse of the Quran that people think about when they think of modesty, right? And this is why I put this one first, that this is all about the women, right? That modesty is all about women covering, and they focus on this specific verse, that modesty is just about hijab, or how loose women are, or how loose clothes they wear, or how they cover their bodies, etc. And that's all modesty is. No, that's not all modesty is. We will discuss details of it. What modesty is for men, what it is for women, what it is not, what you should show, what you should hide, etc. But the first verse that I wanted to highlight is in Surah Al-Ahzab, verse number 59, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet, and by proxy to all of the believers, O Prophet, tell your wives and your daughters and the women of the believers to draw their clothes all over their bodies, meaning they should cover their chest and their backs and wear loose clothing, and that this will be better for them. They should be known so not to be annoyed, and Allah is oft forgiving and most merciful. So when we think of modesty, this is the verse this is what most people gravitate towards, that this is what modesty is. When in fact, there's a lot more to modesty. And let me just read some of the ahadith and some of the ayat that I cherry-picked. There were too many to list here, but I just cherry-picked some of them. So let me just go through them one by one. And you will start to see some of the themes that I'm going to discuss later on in this talk emerging. This is from Sahih Bukhari, Volume 1, Book 2, Hadith number 8, which was narrated by Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anha, in which the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, faith, iman, or belief consists of more than 60 branches or parts. And haya, which covers a large number of contents, which means including self-respect, modesty, scruples, etc., is a part of faith or a part of iman. In the Quran, in chapter 7, verse 26, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the children of Adam, O children of Adam, we have bestowed raiment upon you to cover yourselves, and as an adornment and the raiment of a righteousness that is better. Now, raiment refers to clothes, something that you cover yourself with. But notice what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here. O children of Adam, we have bestowed raiment or clothes upon you to cover yourself with. This is one of the benefits of clothing. But it is also as an adornment. So you're thinking, hey, hang on a second. Just a second ago, I was talking about you should be hiding your beauty, and now the Quran is saying that I should be displaying my beauty, I should be adorning myself, beautifying myself, and the answer is yes. There are times when you should hide your beauty. You should hide your shame. You should hide your body. And there are times that you should not. And that is from modesty. There are times when one should be bashful, one should be shy, and there are times when one should not. And we will discuss those both. And this is one clear example that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is specifically dictating for us in this verse, that clothes aren't just to be used to cover yourself, but they're also to be used for beautification. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says in Surah Al-Duha, which was incidentally the first surah that we discussed, which was فَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ, which is verse 11. Proclaim the graces of your Lord. So hang on a second. Just a second ago, I talked about one should hide one's accomplishments, one's that what one has been given. On this one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying what? To proclaim the graces of your Lord. So what am I supposed to do? Should I hide or should I proclaim? Question. That's a good question, and we will discuss the details of when it is permissible and when it is impermissible, when it is good and when it is blameworthy to be shy. We'll discuss the details of that. In Surah An-Nur, verse number 30, this one is the one that specifically I wanted to highlight for the men. One problem that I see among our society, our Muslim brothers and sisters, is that one thing that they seem to think is modesty is just limited to women. And it is true, certain dress codes are stricter for women. But this is one example in which modesty is, one part of modesty is stricter for men, which is lowering their gaze. Lowering their gaze, and the standard for lowering your gaze and what you're allowed to look at and what you're not allowed to look at is much stricter for men than it is for women. The dress code is stricter for women than it is for men, but what men are allowed to look at, that's stricter for men than it is for women. In fact, there are ahadith in which the Prophet ﷺ permitted Sayyidina Aisha to look at men. But there are plenty of ahadith, and I didn't want to go into too many details, in which the Prophet ﷺ literally grabbed a sahabi's face and turned it away to prevent them from looking at women. So, the dress code for women might be more, but the rulings for lowering their gaze and what you're allowed to look at and what you're not allowed to look at is a lot stricter when it comes to men. Why? Because our religion takes into account the differences between men and women. For men, the weakness is the gaze. For women, the weakness is the clothes. And those are the pieces, those are the parts of human life that the religion wants to control. And that's why the rulings are slightly different for men and for women. The unfair part is to think that this is all about the women when it is not. Some of the other hadith on the topic. This is from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. By the way, this is from, and this is narrated by Imam Muslim. The hadith is number 131. And this is from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "No one will enter paradise who has an atom's weight of pride in their heart." And a man asked, what if a man likes his clothes, likes to look good, and shoes to look good? And the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah is beautiful and loves beauty. Pride means denying the truth and looking down upon people. Meaning it is perfectly acceptable in the right circumstances to beautify yourself, to wear good clothes, to wear decent shoes, to have a decent life. It's totally okay. Pride is when you think you are higher than others because of those things. That my clothes are nicer, that my house is nicer, my job is better, so other people are whatever. That's what the Prophet ﷺ is telling us here. That it is perfectly okay for you to wear decent clothes, for you to wear nice shoes, for you to wear a decent watch, for you to have a nice car, no problem. But having pride means to deny the truth, and based upon what you have and who you are, and you think you are of higher status, looking down upon others and thinking, look how good I am, and that person is just nothing compared to me. It was also reported, this one is related by Imam Ahmad and Tirmidhi and Nasa'i, and many scholars have classed this one as Sahih. It was reported by, and this one I had a problem even when I was reading it last time, Abu al-Ahwas al-Jashami, who said that the Prophet ﷺ saw him wearing old and tattered clothes. And he asked him, do you have any wealth? And the Sahabi, Abu al-Ahwas, replied, yes. The Prophet asked him, what kind of wealth? He said, all that Allah has given me of camels and sheep. And he had a lot of camels and sheep. And the Prophet ﷺ replied, then show the generous blessings that he has given you. Meaning that if you have money, if you have some wealth, it should show on your body. If you have money, you should not be dressing in tattered, shabby clothes. This is one thing that was very prevalent in previous society. And even today, in today's society, this type of mentality is very difficult to get rid of among people. They think that somehow being religious equates to, wearing bad clothes, living a shabby, hermetic lifestyle, giving up the world, and just, looking like a hobo or a homeless person. Essentially, now heaven forbid if that's somebody's actual situation. I don't look down upon these people. Absolutely not. That's not what I meant. But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you money, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you wealth, it should show on you. Now you are also thinking, hey, just a second ago, you asked me to hide what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me, and this one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking me to show, or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is asking me to show. What does all this mean? And I will go into what is meant by that in just a second. What is the opposite of modesty? And in order to understand this, we have to understand this as well. What is the opposite of modesty? The opposite of modesty is obviously immodesty. The opposite of shyness is boastfulness, etc. And this immodesty can take many forms. It can be immodesty in clothing, immodesty in action. You do something, you do an evil action, or you do something that is within your actions, and you can speak immodestly as well. But in and of itself, wearing good clothes is not considered immodest. When does it become immodest? Is if a woman is wearing nice, beautiful clothes in front of men who are not allowed to see her beauty. That's when it becomes immodest. Having wealth is not immodest. Being rich is not immodest. Plenty of the Sahaba were very wealthy people. No problem. As long as you give zakat on it, as long as you give charity, no problem. Be wealthy. What is immodest is showing it off in front of others and to look down upon others because of what you possess. Making them feel bad. One particular example that I've seen in Pakistani society is the rich have made marriage impossible for the poor. Why? Because they keep showing off their wealth in terms when it comes to their children or themselves getting married. It has become near impossible for a poor person to get married. Why? Because they keep showing off their wealth, and because the poor are constantly feeling the social pressure, so they go into debt, more and more debt, in order to get married. Again, having wealth is not immodest, but showing it off, thinking yourself higher than others, thinking yourself better than others, that's immodest. Being and feeling beautiful, having nice clothes, wearing perfume, cleaning yourself up, wearing your hair nicely, none of this is immodest. It only becomes immodest when you exceed the bounds of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, for men, if they wear nice clothes or they wear decent stuff to attract attention from women who are not their wives, that's when it becomes immodest. For women, when they express their beauty, when they wear perfume, when they wear nice clothes in front of men who are not their husbands, that's when it becomes immodest. If you stay within the bounds set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is practically nothing that is immodest. And this is what we talk about when we talk about the limits of modesty. What are the limits of modesty? And what is commendable and what is blameworthy modesty? You heard that right. There is a type of modesty that is blameworthy. If a person is being modest, in certain situations, a person should not be modest. A person should be doing something, and I'll show you, and I'll give you examples of when modesty becomes blameworthy. Number one such example is when one ascribes one wealth to his or her own efforts. Look at me, check out how fly I am. Look at my car. Look at my house. When one expresses the beauty one possesses when it should be hidden, like we talked about just a second ago, that one expresses the beauty when it should be hidden, and this is the limit of modesty, or when one hides it when it should be displayed. Meaning that if a woman expresses her beauty in front of men who are not her husband, she is blameworthy. But if she hides her beauty in front of her husband, she's also blameworthy. That is the time when she should be dressing up. That is the time when she should be looking nice. That is the time when she should be attracting the attention of a man, her husband. So, if you exceed the bound, if you become so modest that not only do you hide your beauty in front of men, but you hide your beauty in front of your husband as well, that's when you have exceeded the bounds. That's when that modesty has become blameworthy. That's no longer modesty. That's bad. You should be displaying your beauty to your husband. A man should be displaying his good looks, his nice clothes, his perfume, his decent attire, his best self to his wife. He should not be hiding it thinking, oh, you know what, I'm a little too shy. No, that's when modesty becomes blameworthy. Another kind of modesty, another kind of shyness, it becomes blameworthy. There is when a person feels too shy to do good deeds. Meaning, there are certain acts of worship in our deen that are actually communal acts of worship. One specifically being the salah. When the call of prayer is made, and men, not so much women, but men, are required to get up in congregation and pray, can somebody feel modesty at that point? Be like, you know what, I don't want to get up and pray because I'm going to look like, I'm somehow a pious person. You know what, I want to be modest about it. I don't want to boast about how much I pray. No, at that point, let go of your modesty, let go of your shyness, stand up for prayer. You should be starting to see a common theme running through all of this talk. which is this. The limit of modesty is as follows. When you stay within the bounds of Allah, practically everything this religion recommends is perfectly acceptable for you to do. Everything is perfectly acceptable for you to do. As soon as you leave those boundaries, those limits set by Allah, you become immodest. But within the boundaries of Allah, you can do whatever you like. Our religion is not a religion of hermits, of monks and nuns. It is a practical religion that you can implement in your life, and you will see the benefits of it. So remember, the limits of modesty are to stay within the bounds of Allah. And when you stay within those boundaries set by Allah, you are perfectly within your rights and actually, it's highly recommended. And you are doing a good deed if you express your beauty, if you do a good deed. But if you exceed the bounds, or if you don't display your beauty, or if you don't spend your wealth, or if you don't do a good deed, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has recommended it, that's when it becomes immodest. I hope it becomes clear. So, why is modesty needed? Number one, it will avoid having you fall into sins such as fornication, such as premarital, extramarital sex, and its associated bad side effects. One of the other great benefits of modesty is that it will keep your heart serene, content, and you will live a happy, contented life. Notice that some of the people who express their beauty, who express their talent, who are boastful about themselves are who? Musicians and entertainers, right? They're considered some of the most successful, wealthiest, best-looking people in the world. But they are also committed suicide in incredible rates. One of the wealthiest, most talented, and perhaps before he got his surgeries done, best-looking people in the world was Michael Jackson. But what happened? Just in order to survive, he had to take a cocktail of medication. Just in order to function, he had to take a cocktail of medication that would make a horse go into a coma. But this guy had to do it. Why? His heart wasn't serene. His heart wasn't content. He was immodest, and he couldn't live a happy, contented life, which eventually killed him. You will avoid this stress of being a show-off. You will avoid the stress of going into the rat race. My clothes aren't as nice as the nice person. My house is smaller than my neighbor's. My car isn't as nice as that guy or this guy. And until you get that next car, until you realize somebody else has a better car, and then another, and then another, and then another, and you will become so stressed out. You'll become so unhappy with your life. I can't even, there are no words for it when you enter that rat race. You just have to stop being a show-off, and you will avoid all this associated stress. And why is modesty needed? And this is one thing that I can't overlook, that women are the primary victims of a loss of modesty in the world that we see today. Because they are the ones who I've seen who think that they must adhere to impossible artificial standards that are plastered all over billboards, what I like to call the Photoshop standard. They think that unless I'm that skinny, unless my skin is like that, unless my hair is like that, unless I wear that, I'm not good enough. Instances of anorexia, bulimia, self-hatred, stress, stress eating, overweight, underweight, all these problems have just skyrocketed among young women. But men also suffer. They consider, am I good enough? Do I have as much wealth as that next guy? Do I have as much money as that next guy? Am I good enough? Am I good enough? Or they start comparing themselves or other women to their spouses. Is my wife as pretty as that other one? Is my wife as tall as that other one? Etc., etc. This loss of modesty has affected both men and women. And if you are modest in your heart and your actions, you will avoid all of these negative consequences. Now, what are some of the ways to build modesty? Number one, you must educate your children. Today's talk is a good start. But it is insufficient for you to force your children to wear hijab, to wear modest clothing, to wear loose clothing, or to force your son to not go to a particular movie or not do this or not do that. If you don't educate, if you don't, the word is tarbiyah, if you don't instruct your children, if you don't give them the right upbringing, if you don't train them, as soon as they leave the house, as soon as that force is not there, that physical modesty that you forced upon them will disappear. Educating your children comes first. That means you must become yourself educated about what is modesty, why it's necessary, and why it's good for you. Why it is gross for little children to be wearing mini skirts. Educate yourself first, then educate your children. Education comes first. But then it must be followed by no double standards. What I mean by that is, if you are going to, and it's not an if you're going to ask your daughter to wear hijab and to wear modest clothing, you should be doing that yourself. It cannot be so that when the daughter goes to school, she has to wear hijab. But when the mother goes to the wedding, she can wear whatever she likes. The men that are present at the wedding are not her husband, not her father, not her brother. She should hide her beauty. Just like you are expecting your daughters to hide their beauty in front of men who are not related to them, you must hide your beauty in front of men who are not related to you as the mother. There should be no double standard. Similarly, for men, if you are expecting your son to not watch a particular film or movie is because it's sexually explicit, you can't be watching that same stuff. If your child is too young to watch a particular movie, that's the quote-unquote phrase we use, right? Oh, you're too young to watch this. Well, I'm afraid if he's too young to watch this, that movie is probably inappropriate enough that you shouldn't be watching it either. Excuse me. There should be no double standard between yourself and your children. Live it. Set yourself as the example. And there should be no boys versus girls mentality. Meaning, yes, there are some rulings that differ for the genders, and I will go into the differences of the rulings in just a second. Yes, girls have to cover more, but that does not mean modesty is only for women. Not true. Modesty is just for girls. Not true. The guy can wear skin-tight clothing, the girl can't. No, they are both immodest. No double standards. One of the modern problems, and this is one thing that I would say that most parents have to get educated and children have to get educated about as well. You have to monitor your family's media consumption, what they watch on TV, etc. And you have to get educated about the following. What are movie ratings? What is an R rating? What is a PG rating? What is a PG-13 rating? What is an NC-17 rating? Anybody familiar with that rating? What is rated G? Etc. Video game ratings. If your son or daughter wants to play a video game, what does it mean that it's rated T for teen? Rated 10 and up. Rated 21 and over. What does that mean? Educate yourself about this. If you're going to bring devices into your house, such as televisions, such as phones, and if you're going to give your children phones, and if you're going to give your children iPads, you have to learn about the parental controls that are available on those devices. To learn about the parental controls that are available on your TV, available on phones, available on tablets, etc. You have to know how to work an iPhone if you're going to give an iPhone to your child. Sorry, there is no exception. You must know this. Then you can ask your child to follow your lead. Social media and internet etiquette, you must educate yourself about social media, what it means to post something on Facebook and social media, and how anything you post on the internet stays there forever. Any pictures you post stay there forever. They can never come down. What is social media and internet etiquette? Finally, learn about the toys and games that your children are exposed to. I don't think it's a good idea for your daughter to be playing with Bratz doll. If you don't know what a Bratz doll is, find out. Do you know what a Barbie is? Well, do you know who Ken is? Do you know who Barbie is? Do you know what Ken and Barbie's relationship is? Do you know what the game of life is? Or do you know what the game called Sims is? Educate yourself about the media, the toys, the games that your children are exposed to. It's part of you being a parent. You have to know this. Also, you should be monitoring your children's friends and giving them role models to follow. You are their first role model, always and absolutely. But you should also be letting them know about other role models in your community that they should follow, role models at large in the world that they should follow, role models in history that they should follow. You should be their role model. The Sahaba can be their role model. The scholars of Islam who are alive and who have passed can be their role model. The scientists in the world who are doing something good for this world can be their role models. Give yourself, your children, your positive role models to follow. Be their role models first. And also, monitor your children's friends and make an effort to find good friends for your children. Just because a family is Muslim, that does not mean they're modest people. Automatically, just because a person is Muslim, that does not mean they're modest. That does not mean what level of or what kind of media and other things they consume in their home. If you're sending your children to someone else's house, you better know what goes on in that house, or at least make an effort to find out. Not all Muslims are modest. Not all non-Muslims are immodest. Learn, make an effort to find good friends for your children. A Muslim should be modest, but that's a big should. There's a huge gap between should and actually is. Make sure you find someone who actually is. All right. Some rulings on modesty. You should. Now, this is one thing that I didn't have a chance to do, and I didn't do is because it'll become the talk is too long. All the evidences for these rulings, what there are, etc., I am required to present them to you if you ask them for it. Number 1, separate the children's beds at the age of 7. If your child is older than 7, they should not be sleeping in the same bed as another brother or sister. Younger than 7 is fine, If they sleep in the same cot or they sleep in the same bed, no problem. But when they're older than 7 or when they reach the age of 7, you should be separating their beds. They should no longer be sleeping under the same covers in the same bed. Separate them. Women have to cover more than men. That is true. There are stricter rules, and the rules are your face, your hands, those can be uncovered in front of non-mahram or men who you are not related to. But when you are alone, when you are with your husband, when you're with your brother, no problem. You can express your beauty in a reasonable fashion. Men, however, because we talked about the stricter rules for women, we also must talk about the stricter rules for men. Men have to lower their gaze more than women, meaning it might be permitted under certain circumstances for women to look at men, but it is never permitted for men to look at non-mahram women they're not related to stare at them. So yes, the rules of wearing, the rules of dress are stricter for women, true, but the rules of the gaze are stricter for men. Avoid physical contact with the opposite gender. Don't shake hands with people. Don't give people hugs that you are not related to. Beautifying. What an epic fail on the spelling here. Women should avoid beautifying, not beautifying, beautifying themselves outside the home and cover themselves outside the home, as should men. Yes, men should be covered in good, decent clothing when they're outside the house, not to attract women's attention. Beautifying, by the way, means, or beautify means to sanctify or to make a saint or to make holy. Beautifying is the word I was trying to use, not beautifying. My apologies. The reason it didn't catch us is because I'm missing a U. One thing that men should also avoid, they should avoid wearing silk. They should not be wearing gold, and men should grow some facial hair. Just like you're expected, or you're expecting your daughter to display her Islam, right? When your daughter goes out of the house, you expect her to be covered. It shows on her face. But you feel so protected, right? Oh, I'm clean shaven. Nobody needs to know my Islam. Her struggle on a day-to-day basis is a lot harder than yours because she has to wear the hijab. The modern negative feelings that people have toward Islam, she is literally the walking personification of it. You, when you shave your beard, when you wear clothes just like non-Muslim men, you don't wear a kufi, there's nothing about you that looks like that you're a Muslim. You don't have to feel that stress, do you? Go ahead, grow some facial hair. Once in a while, go outside, walk in a jilbab. Or is that a thobe? I'm not sure. I don't remember the Arabic word. Go ahead, wear a kufi outside. See what it feels like. That's what your daughter goes through when you force her to wear hijab. Why is it that you force her, but you don't do it yourself? Okay. On to the difficult part and the last part of today's lecture. Some of the difficult conversations that you will likely have to have, excuse me, with your children. Don't think that what I'm about to talk about, your children don't know about this. You are sadly, sadly mistaken. Parents are sometimes so naive about their children and what they know, this, oh my God, my child can't be like that. It's not my child mentality. That is just annoying. They're so naive. It's annoying. But children sometimes also give so little credit to the parents that it's kind of sad. Kids, your parents have lived life, meaning that once they were in exactly your spot. How old you are now, they were once that old. What you are going through now, they once went through as well. Don't think that your parents haven't gone through or they don't understand what you are going through, the difficulties you face. Give them their due credit. They've lived their lives. They have experience. But parents, please understand that your kids are going through a lot of difficulty. Some of the difficult conversations are number one, sexting and inappropriate use of social media. If your child has an iPad, an iPhone, a desktop computer, practically any social media device, he has either already, number one, received a sexually explicit media clip, a sexually explicit image, a sexually explicit text message, just plain text, no image. He has already received it, and if not sent it. At least he or she has received it. You must know that this has already happened. And this is a difficult conversation you have to have with your child. What is sexting? Do you even know? What is appropriate and inappropriate use of social media? Do you know that recently, I'm going to say maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, Facebook got hacked and my entire newsfeed was full of sexually explicit material that my nephew was looking at. If your children live in the modern world, they have seen this stuff. They have been exposed to this. You have to have a conversation with them about what is sexting, what is inappropriate use of social media, if they have received this stuff, what to do with if they get into this, and how to avoid the peer pressure associated with this stuff. You have to have this difficult conversation. You can't avoid it. Second difficult conversation that you have to have with your children is when it comes to gender relations. Your children are already being exposed to these ideas that these types of relations between the genders, relations such as friendships, that a boy and a girl can be just friends, quote unquote, the platonic friendship. What does it mean? Right? That a boy and a girl, we're just friends. We're just friends. Right? There's nothing inappropriate here. Because friendship is just such a beautiful, such a clean, such a pure relationship. If you've seen any Bollywood movie recently, this has permeated in Indian society as well. Why? A guy and a girl can never just remain friends. They're first friends, and then they fall in love, and then the music comes on, and then they go around the trees, and the rain starts falling, and the tabla starts playing. Some of you might be laughing. Friendships and what it means between genders, you have to have this difficult conversation with your child. That pure and simple friendship is only possible between a dude and a dude, a female and a female. It is not permitted. And why? What's the difficulty? What's the problem between having friendships between a guy and a girl? You have to have this conversation. Your children are already thinking that these types of friendships are perfectly okay, and that you are somehow backward for thinking that, hey, a guy and a girl can't be friends, just friends. Oh man, mom, you're living so yesterday. Leave me alone. Another thing that is more and more, if your children don't already think this, I commend you for this. But there's a normalization of a romantic, sometimes even sexual relationship between guys and girls we call boyfriends and girlfriends, right? And if you have children, they definitely have been exposed to this in popular media. Absolutely. And popular media attempts to normalize this. Perfectly okay for a 15-year-old girl to quote unquote go steady, meaning have a steady boyfriend, or for a 14-year-old guy to have a steady girlfriend when he's not even reached high school yet. Preschool. Kids have boyfriends and girlfriends in kindergarten. What does this mean? Are we normalizing a romantic relationship between boys and girls? And if you have slightly older children, trust me when I say they probably have been approached already with requests to become boyfriends or girlfriends. And sometimes people will not be kind to your children. They will not. Children will not be kind to your children. Women, I'm sorry, not to say women, girls will come up to your son and say, hey, want to be my boyfriend? And if you haven't trained him, if you haven't done his tarbiyah, if you haven't educated him, it'll be a million times hard for him to say no to that. Imagine if this conversation, hi, want to be my boyfriend? No, it's not permitted in my religion. What were you gay? No, I'm not gay. It's just not permitted in my religion. Oh, you're one of those fundamentalist Muslims, aren't you? No, I'm not. Just that, boyfriends and girlfriends, I'm not allowed. Oh, you don't like all this? Check me out. You're gay. You're obviously gay. I'm going to tell all your friends you're gay. Your child already has had these conversations or is going to have these conversations. You need to be talking to them about it. Another difficult conversation that you have to have with your child is about the sexualization of children. More and more in popular media, children are expected to, or their clothes are expected to look like adults, and adults are already sexualized enough as it is. Your child wants to go to the store, wants to do his summer shopping, obviously, last year's clothes don't fit anymore. Wants to buy next year's clothes. Mom, why are you having me buy this loose stuff? I want those pants. That figure hug that look like yoga pants. You have to talk to your children about this problem, that you should not sexualize yourself, that children should not be sexualized. Pornography and its normalization. I don't know if you've been following the news recently, but pornography is a big industry in the United States. It's no hidden secret to anybody. It's not hidden anymore. But pornography still is considered something inappropriate. People talk about it in somewhat hushed tones. You don't see it on TV, but there is a push by the pornography industry to make it normal. And let me tell you, your child, if he has a phone, a tablet, already has probably looked at pornography. You have to get educated about why pornography is not normal. And you have to talk to your children about it. Sorry, it's going to be a hard and difficult conversation, but it has to happen. Finally, if you think that your children have not been exposed to the topic of sex, of masturbation, you are sadly mistaken. If they haven't already been exposed to it, the literal the literal definition of how to have sex or how to masturbate or what that means, you're also sadly mistaken. If they haven't already, they are going to take some kind of health education class in school, in middle school, sometimes before middle school, definitely in high school. Can you have an honest, open, near impossible, difficult conversation with your child? I'm afraid you have to. I'm afraid you have to. You cannot avoid it. I know this talk has been heavy, my apologies. But in conclusion, what did we talk about today? We talked about modesty and its necessity, why modesty is necessary. We talked about some ways to build modesty in yourself, in your children, and some of the challenges, some of the difficult conversations that are likely to come your way in this. And obviously, as always, I'm looking for suggestions for next week's topic. Jazakallah khair for joining me today. I'm going to put everybody on unmute. And as soon as I put you guys on unmute, you will then be able to hear each other and you will be able to talk amongst the group. Jazakallah khair. And I'm going, hang on one second. Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdika wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Let's go manage participants. And let's say unmute all, and everybody is now free to contribute. Assalamu alaikum. Any questions, any comments, any suggestions? Everybody's on unmute now. And if you have unmuted yourself, or muted yourself, I'm going to put you on unmute. Mom, I'm trying to unmute you. There we go. Now everybody can hear everybody. If you want to, you can put yourself back on mute.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम फैसल बेटा।
वालेकुम सलाम।
हाँ, अब माशाल्लाह आपने बहुत अच्छा एक्सप्लेन किया है। और हम लोग जो ख़वातीन और ख़ासतौर में माएँ घर में होती हैं और हम सोचते हैं कि ज़ाहिर है इतने बड़े बड़े टॉपिक्स हैं, ये इतने बड़े बड़े वो हैं, मुश्किलात हैं। हम लोगों के लिए थोड़ा सा मुश्किल होगा कि किस तरह से अपने बच्चों के साथ इन टॉपिक्स पे बात की जाए। लेकिन आपका कहना भी बिल्कुल बेटा सही है कि जब तक हम लोग बात नहीं करेंगे, अपने आप को पहले तो एजुकेट नहीं करेंगे और उसके बाद जब तक बच्चों से कन्वर्सेशन नहीं करेंगे तो उस वक्त तक जो एक गैप है वो हमारे दरमियान जो है ना वो आता चला जाएगा।
बिल्कुल।
एक बहुत थोड़ी सी बच्चियां जब हमारे घर में होती हैं और हम चाहते हैं कि ये जब बाहर जाएं तो ये मॉडेस्ट हों, तो उसकी ट्रेनिंग मेरा ख्याल है हम लोगों को सबसे पहले घर से करनी पड़ेगी। वो इस तरह से कि जब ये लोग घर में भी होती हैं और जब इनके फादर घर में होते हैं, और मेरे घर में तो कोई भाई नहीं हुआ, लेकिन बाज़ फैमिलीज ऐसी हैं जिनके भाई भी घर में होते हैं, तो तब भी हमारी बच्चों को चाहिए कि वो इस तरह की ड्रेसेस में रहें सारा दिन कि जिसको देख के फादर या ब्रदर उसका कोई है अगर घर में, तो उसको ये ना लगे कि ये क्या है। जैसे हमारी बच्चियां सारा दिन माशाल्लाह जब उठती हैं तो उसके बाद से जो स्लीपिंग ड्रेस में होती है वो टाइट पजामा, ऊंची शर्ट, उसी में सारा दिन फिरती रहती हैं। कह के क्या मर जाओ भाई, चेंज कर लो कपड़े, चेंज कर लो, तुम्हारा बाप घर पे है, तुम्हारा बाप घर पे है, वो देखता है। तो शुरू से ही किस्म की जो वो एक वो है ना बच्चियों में एक शाइनेस की या मॉडेस्टी की जो एक सेंस होती है कि हम क्यों कवर करें, क्यों वो हो, तो वो खत्म ही हो जाती है। घर से नहीं मिल रहा है। अब हम उसे ये कहें सारा दिन तो तुम पजामे में टाइट पैंट के साथ बाप के साथ सामने फिरती रहो, ठीक है ना, उसके बाद जब तुम घर बाहर जा रही हो तो तुम वो ले लो, तो वो सोचेगी भाई मैं ये क्यों करूं। और एक बाप के लिए अपनी बच्चियों को इस हालत में देखना जिसमें उसकी पूरी फिक्र जो है वो मालूम कर सकता है एक बाप کہ میری بچی کا سائز کیا ہے, وہ کیا پہنے ہوئے ہے, کیا نہیں پہنے ہوئے, کس طرح کا ہے اس کا حلیہ. تو یہ ایک بہت بڑا گناہ ہے جو ہم اپنے ہسبینڈ کو بھی آفر کر رہے ہوتے ہیں, ساتھ ساتھ اپنے بچوں کو بھی کر رہے ہوتے ہیں. اور ماشاءاللہ ہم بہت سوچتے ہیں کہ نہیں کچھ نہیں ہو رہا جی, بالکل صحیح. ہم تو ہمیں اپنے بچوں کو بتانا پڑے گا کہ اپنے ماں باپ کے سامنے, اپنے باپ کے سامنے, اپنے بھائیوں کے سامنے اپنی اوڑھنیوں کو, اپنے اپنے چسٹ کو کور کر کے رکھو اور اپنے ہپس کو بھی کور کر کے رکھو. یہی شرم تمہارے اندر آج ہوگی تو کل سسرال میں جا کے شرم ہوگی. ورنہ ہم آج یہی دیکھتے ہیں, ہماری جتنی ماشاءاللہ خاندان میں بچیاں آ رہی ہیں سب اپنے گھر میں اٹھ کے یوں اٹھ کے اور اپنا بھائی سلیپنگ ڈریس میں ہوتی ہے, ساس کے سامنے بھی اسی طرح سے آ رہی ہے, سسر کے سامنے بھی اسی طرح سے آ رہی ہیں, اور دیور تو خیر ہے ہی, وہ تو کچھ بھی نہیں ہے. تو کم از کم اپنے بچوں کو یہ چاہیے کہ اٹھ کے کم از کم یہ جو سلیپنگ ڈریس ہے وہ صرف بیڈ تک ہونا چاہیے. تم اٹھو سب سے پہلے اپنے کپڑے بدلو لو, کیونکہ تمہارا باپ گھر میں ہے, وہ سارا وقت دیکھ رہا ہے تمہیں, تم بھی گناہ میں ملوث ہو رہی ہے, اس کو بھی گناہ میں ملوث کیا ہوا ہے.
فیصل السلام علیکم.
وعلیکم السلام.
میں بس اس میں ایک بات باجی یہ ایڈ کروں گی, جہاں تک بچوں کی اپ برنگنگ, جیسے فیصل ماشاءاللہ بتا رہا ہے کہ چھوٹی عمر سے, جیسے جب چھوٹے بچے تب سے, جیسے آپ اگر اس کو, میں یہ نہیں کہہ رہی خدا نہ خواستہ آپ اس کو شروع سے نہیں بتا رہی, ڈیفینیٹلی بچے نہیں سن رہے, there should be some other way to tell them کہ جیسے ان کو ہو سکتا ہے کہ ہماری کمیونیکیشن صحیح نہیں ہے باجی بچیوں اور ہمارے درمیان, ہم ان کو صحیح طرح سے کنوے نہیں کر پا رہے شاید یہ میسج کہ بھائی کیوں ضروری ہے یہ سب کچھ. فیصل کا آج کل ٹاپک بھی میرے خیال سے یہی ہے کہ ماں اور بچوں کے درمیان جو کمیونیکیشن ہے نا وہ ایسا ہونا چاہیے. میں یہ نہیں کہہ رہی کہ آپ سلیپنگ سوٹ میں پھرتی ہیں, ماشاءاللہ آپ تو مجھے لگتا ہے گھر میں بھی شرعی حجاب میں پھرتی ہیں. کہنے کا مقصد یہ ہے کہ بچوں اور ماں باپ کے درمیان میرے خیال سے اچھی کمیونیکیشن ہونی چاہیے کہ they should know کہ why this is not good or why this is bad.
اور جو خالہ نے, چھوٹی خالہ نے جو بات کی ہے نا, وہ آپ اگر آپ موسٹ لائکلی رضیہ خالہ آپ جو ہے اپنے بچیوں کو یہ اپنے گھر میں کنوینس کر لیں گے, نو پرابلم, ٹھیک ہے. لیکن جب تک آپ ان سے ان کے لیول پہ کمیونیکیٹ کر کے ان کو کنوینس نہیں کر سکتی نا, ٹھیک ہے. اور یہ اس میں انسانیت کی اصلاح کے لیے جس کام کے لیے انبیاء کو بھیجا گیا, جس کام کے لیے ہمیں بھی کرنا ہے, اپنے بچوں کے لیے کرنا ہے, اپنے کمیونٹی میں کرنا ہے, انسان کی اصلاح کرنے کے لیے بے تحاشا محنت چاہیے, دانتوں سے پسینہ آ جاتا ہے. اتنی آپ مثلاً جو ابھی جو آپ کی جو آپ نے بات کہی نا رضیہ خالہ, مجھے آپ کی فرسٹریشن I can feel it through the audio. لیکن یہ فرسٹریشن, اس سے کہیں زیادہ فرسٹریشن ہمیشہ لوگوں کو امر بالمعروف و نہی عن المنکر کرنے سے آئی ہے. آپ کو اپنے بچوں سے کمیونیکیٹ کرنا پڑے گا, ان کو بتانا پڑے گا کہ کیوں, ٹھیک ہے. ان کو بتانے کے بعد, ان کی تربیت کرنے کے بعد, ان کو کنونس کرنے کے بعد پھر ان کو فورس بھی کرنا ہوگا کہ خبردار مجھے تم اس طرح کی بکواس چیزوں میں نظر آئیں. لیکن اگر آپ نے کبھی ان کو بتایا ہی نہیں ہے, کبھی ان سے اس طرح سے کمیونیکیٹ ہی نہیں کیا ہے, بس صرف سوٹا لے کے آپ ان کے سر پہ کھڑے ہیں, تو جب وہ اسی طرح اسلامک سکولز میں آپ چلے جائیں, جتنے بھی اسلامک سکول ٹیچرز ہیں آپ کو یہی بات بتائیں گے. حمیرہ نے مجھے یہ بتایا, جتنے بھی اسلامک سکول گھر میں ماں باپ کے سوٹے کی وجہ سے بچیاں, او مائی گاڈ, جیسے اسکول آئیں ڈفرنٹ پرسن. یہ کام اور یہ جو ڈیفیکلٹی ہے نا کہ بچیاں میری نہیں سنتی, آپ کو اس میں بے تحاشا صبر کرنا ہوگا اور صبر کرتے رہنا پڑے گا. یہ کام آسان نہیں ہے, انسان کی اصلاح کرنا آسان کام نہیں ہے, دانتوں سے پسینہ آ جاتا ہے. لیکن آخر میں جب آپ نے اپنا کام کر لیا, مثلاً آپ نے اچھی طرح کمیونیکیٹ کر دیا, اچھی طرح ان کو بتا دیا کہ اس وجہ سے میں تمہیں اس کام سے منع کر رہی ہوں, اور پھر ان کے اوپر رولز بھی کیے اور ان کوئی ڈبل اسٹینڈرڈ نہیں رکھتا. خود تو کیا نام ہے کام کیا, اپنے بچوں سے کچھ اور ایکسپیکٹ کیا, یا لڑکوں سے کچھ اور ایکسپیکٹ کیا اور لڑکیوں سے کچھ اور ایکسپیکٹ کیا. آپ نے یہ سب کام نہیں کیا. آپ کا اسٹینڈرڈ بچوں اور بچیوں پر ایک ہی تھا. اس کے بعد اب آپ کی رسپانسبلٹی ختم ہو گئی, کیونکہ آخر میں ایونچولی آپ کے بچے ایک وقت بڑے ہوں گے اور ایک وقت ان کو بھی جس طرح آپ کو اکیلے اللہ کے سامنے کھڑا ہو کے جواب دینا ہوگا. آپ کو صرف اتنا جواب دینا ہوگا کہ کیا تم نے صحیح طرح اپنے بچوں کی تربیت کی. اگر آپ نے اپنا کام کر دیا, ان کو تربیت کر دی, ان کو پیار سے بھی سمجھایا, ان سے ریزن بھی کیا اور ان کے اوپر رولز بھی لگائے, ڈبل سٹینڈرڈ نہیں رکھا, اس کے بعد آپ کا جواب اللہ کے سامنے آسان ہو گیا. اگر اس کے باوجود آپ کی بیٹیاں یا آپ کے بچے برے کام کرتے ہیں تو بھائی انبیاء کے بچے بھی بگڑے تھے, ہم کہاں سے, ہم کس کھیت کی مندی ہیں. آخر میں everybody including your children, ساروں کے ساروں کو اللہ کے سامنے اکیلے کھڑے ہو کے جواب دینا. آپ کا جواب ایز اے پیرنٹ آپ سے سوال یہ ہوگا کہ کیا تم نے اپنے بچوں کو صحیح طرح پالا. ٹھیک ہے, اگر پالا نو پرابلم. اگر اس کے بعد بگڑ گئے تو بھائی each to his own. اور اس میں فرسٹریٹ نہیں ہونا. 1000 بار وہ آپ کی بات بھی نہیں مانیں گے, وہ آپ سے ہو سکتا ہے بدتمیزی بھی کریں, یہ سب ہوگا, لیکن آپ یہ راہ نہیں چھوڑ سکتے. یہ وہ راہ ہے جو انبیاء کی راہ ہے. بہت مشکل کام ہے انسانیت کی اصلاح کرنا, بہت مشکل کام. Any other questions, comments, suggestions for next week's topic?
جزاک اللہ. مطلب باقی لوگوں سے پوچھ لو, میں کافی سجیشن دے چکا ہوں.
چوچو ماما اینی ٹائم آپ سجیشن دیں.
اچھا, میرا خیال ہے اب آپ نا تھوڑا سا آ جائیں رسپیکٹ فار پیرنٹس. پیرنٹس کی رسپیکٹ جو ہے نا وہ ہمارے اسلام میں کیوں ضروری ہے. میرا خیال ہے یہ بھی ایک برننگ ٹاپک ہے. مطلب ہمارے بچوں کو یہ بات امبائب ہونی چاہیے کہ ماں باپ کیا, ہمارے اندر تو گھلی ملی ہے نا, ہم تو جس سے اٹھ کے آئے ہیں نا, اور یہ لوگ جو ہے اس میں نہیں ہے. ماں ہے, باپ ہے, تو دا رسپیکٹ فار پیرنٹس. کیوں ماں باپ کی عزت کرنا جو ہے, ان کی فرما برداری ضروری ہے. میرا خیال ہے یہ ٹاپک.
Okay, that's one possible topic. Any others?
Yeah.
نہیں, میرے خیال سے فیصل یہ ٹھیک ہے جو یوسف بھائی نے بتایا نا.
I don't want you guys to follow each other's lead. خود سوچیں, خود بتائیں. Okay. Any other questions? Any other comments regarding today's topic? Okay. I guess next week's topic is probably going to be respect for parents. Lekin, as usual, عام طور پہ ہم جو ہے نا respect for parents as a weapon use کرنا چاہ رہے ہوتے ہیں. تم نہیں جانتے کہ میری بات نہیں مانو گے تو کیا ہوگا. مثلاً پیرنٹس کو یہ فکر ہوتی ہے کہ ہمارے حقوق کیا ہیں, بیوی کو یہ فکر ہوتی ہے کہ بیوی کے حقوق کیا ہیں, ہسبینڈ کو یہ فکر ہوتی ہے کہ ہسبینڈ کے حقوق کیا ہیں, بچوں کو یہ فکر ہوتی ہے کہ بچوں کے حقوق کیا ہیں. حالانکہ ہم سب کے ایٹیٹیوڈ یہ ہونا چاہیے, we should be forgiving towards our rights and we should be exercising our responsibilities to the fullest. مطلب پیرنٹس کے لیے یہ معلوم کرنا زیادہ ضروری ہے کہ ان کے بچوں کے حقوق کیا ہیں. پیرنٹس کے لیے یہ معلوم ہونا زیادہ ضروری نہیں ہے کہ unless they themselves are obviously children or unless they themselves are obviously have parents, ان کے لیے یہ اتنا زیادہ ضروری نہیں ہے کہ پیرنٹس کے رائٹس کیا ہیں. اسی طرح بچوں کے لیے یہ جاننا زیادہ ضروری ہے کہ پیرنٹس کے رائٹس کیا ہیں. ان کے لیے یہ جاننا اتنا زیادہ ضروری نہیں ہے کہ بچوں کے رائٹس کیا ہیں. ٹھیک ہے, تو اگر ماموں آپ نے یہ سجیشن اس وجہ سے دی ہے تاکہ بچوں کو پتہ لگے, that's a good idea, that's good. لیکن ہمیں کبھی بھی اپنے دین کو ایز اے بارگیننگ چپ لوگوں کے آگے استعمال نہیں کرنا چاہیے. بات سمجھ رہے ہیں؟
ہاں نہیں میں سمجھ رہا ہوں, مطلب اس میں ظاہر ٹو وے ہوگا. ہماری بھی آپ بتائیں گے اس میں کہ بھئی اگر بچوں کے مطلب ہم بچوں کو اس طریقے سے گائیڈ کریں تو ہمارے بھی کیا حقوق ہیں, ہماری بھی کیا ذمہ داریاں ہیں, تو وہ بھی بالکل ڈسکشن ہو, اس پہ بھی اوپن ڈسکشن ہو, اس پہ بھی بات ہو, نو پرابلم.
ٹھیک, گڈ. Any other questions, comments, suggestions? Okay. Sorry, today's lecture was slightly lengthy. معافی چاہتا ہوں, تقریباً 12:30 ہو گئے ہیں. Inshallah, I will see everybody next time. Jazakallah khair for joining me.
اللہ حافظ.
اللهم بحمدك واشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك. السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ everyone.
وعلیکم السلام.
Thank you, Professor. Khuda Hafiz.